Welcome to Access to Justice. I'm your host, Heather Malarick of Merrick Law. I'm joined today by my co-host, Evan Clark of Kahane Law. Hey, Evan, how you doing?
Hey, Heather, I'm doing good, thanks. Just enjoying our descent into the winter. It's pretty much here, so.
Winter, what? Pretty much here? Well, I mean, yeah, we are on the slippery slide down, aren't we?
I'm looking outside. It's overcast. The wind is just whipping the trees around.
Yeah, there's yellow things falling from the trees. Yeah, it's true.
I think it's 20, it's over 20 degrees out there.
Still warm.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to hang on.
Okay.
We're also joined today by Kim McDonald, our very special guest. Kim is a financial advisor and insurance advisor with Raymond James Limited. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm panicking with what Evan's talking about because I need to put stucco on my garage that I just built, and it can't go below 0 degrees to get it on. There's a very limited time I think I've got to get this done, and without making a big fat mess. So Evan's giving me anxiety right now.
So concrete products take 28 days to cure, generally speaking. So does it have to stay above 0 the entire time it's curing, just when you're applying it?
I think so. I think with like a few days.
You're fine.
But overnight, right? Like there's the risk. Anyways, right. I'm sure it'll all work out, or it won't. Whatever. This is life.
I'm doing yourself great. Are putting the stucco on? Like you're out there?
No. Are you kidding me?
Kim has hired someone to do that for her.
I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping you were doing it, but
nice to see you guys.
Yeah, nice to see you both too. We are pleased to welcome today's guest, Dustin Tkachuk of oh my goodness, why am I blanking on your firm name? Lawrence and Tkachuk.
You got it.
Tkachuk.
Thanks for having me.
It's Tkachuk.
It's technically Tkachuk, yeah. A little tidbit, I think any Ukrainian name in the Cyrillic alphabet would be Chuk in Ukrainian. And then when it becomes anglicized, much easier to say Chuck, so.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize for that because I've always called you Tkachuk. And then the hockey playoffs, I became so involved in hating Mr. Tkachuk that I retrained my brain. So now I've got to retrain it back. How are you doing, Dustin? It's so lovely to have you here.
I'm doing very well. I actually think this is kind of like the best month of the year because you can still get the over 20 temperatures. I was on a paddleboard on the North Saskatchewan on Sunday. It was like 28. And then, it gets kind of cool enough at night now. You can kind of go in the hot tub. So it will soon be winter, we know, but I'm hanging on to September. And like Kim, I have some garage work to do myself, and I've been putting it off. So thanks, Evan. I'll get on that as soon as I get home from work today.
Yeah, no, you're right. September is the sweet spot, and it's better than spring because spring is like, well, it's warming up. There's always that threat of a blizzard at any given moment, but it's less likely. It's not impossible. It's less likely in September. So I agree with you. It's kind of the sweet spot.
And things are green in the fall still, whereas in the spring, they're often like brown and yucky for quite a time.
Yeah, don't see Edmonton for your first time in like March or April. It's not going to look too hot.
No, she's not cutting the prettiest picture in those months.
Yeah.
Well, for our listeners who don't know Dustin, Dustin's a family lawyer in Edmonton, Alberta, and he was called to bar in 2005. So he brings a wealth of experience to today's conversation. Dustin is primarily a family lawyer, but also does real estate and wills and estates. And in his spare time, I know you have a passion for music, hiking, and your family.
Those are all true.
Anything else you want to add about yourself for our listeners, Dustin?
No, I think that captures it. I was actually met you, Heather, as you know, and other people might not know. We worked together for about 6 years at Legal Aid. And partner Crystal Lawrence of my firm worked there as well, and we went out in 2016, I think, to form our own firm and in private practice now and enjoying life. So, yeah, life is good. Living the dream might be a stretch, but the life is good.
So Heather, did you follow in his footsteps, or were you first to leave and start?
Well, Dustin and Crystal were first, although I don't know if it's raw, it probably doesn't even matter at this point to, say that we were all sort of looking at options all at the same time. But Dustin and Crystal moved a little more quickly, and we were the guinea pigs, I guess, to see if we're going to crash and burn. And when we were okay, I think everybody else is like, this is a thing that we can do. Yeah, absolutely.
So Dustin, what about, tell me a little bit about your passion for music that Heather mentioned.
Yeah, I'm in my mid 40s and still try and think I can figure out what's cool in terms of music. So I spend time on, music blogs, listening to new bands and stuff, and still can't resist this sort of old man, like music was better when I was younger, but I try every day to listen to new stuff. And I used to be in a little dinky garage band, kind of in my early 20s, just, mostly literally just being in the garage or parents' basement. It was a good way to kind of waste time, stay out of trouble. I still kind of occasionally play guitar, but other responsibilities, parenthood and that kind of stuff got in the way. So still play once in a while, but I try and listen to music every day, walking the dogs on the way to work, that kind of thing.
Nice. So you're a guitar guy?
I'm a guitar guy. Enjoyed Folk Fest this year. The National was headlining, I think on the Saturday night, and I was like, this is awesome. I think it might be a bit too rocky for some of the Folk Fest crowd, because, there's some yelling and some distorted guitar. And I was like, yeah, this is my jam. More like this, Folk Fest.
Nice. And do you have a good sized guitar collection, or just a few trusted axes, or what? I'm down to one electric and one acoustic, so nothing too fancy. You a guitar guy yourself, Evan? Yeah, I've been playing guitar since I was just a young lad of 6 years old.
Awesome.
I should be much better since I started so young than I am, but I'm not really a collector per se. I have guitars that have like function for me. So I don't have a ton, but just have a small handful.
It's one of those things where I feel like if I started collecting, it could get ugly, really quickly.
So fast. Yeah. We had a friend of mine on here who's a sex therapist, Michael Sommerfeld, and he's walking down that path. Which is
a beautiful but dangerous path, yes.
As his friend, it's great for me. I like to watch and see what happens and to touch his guitars.
It's like when you get a boat, right? You don't want to own the boat. You want to have the friend that has the boat.
That's so right.
Enjoy the boat, but not own the boat. Yeah, that's
exactly,
right.
Exactly. Okay, good.
Fantastic. Well, Dustin, today I think, let me preface this by saying that I think you're well known in the family bar as being a really experienced, knowledgeable, and very calm and reasonable person to deal with. So I was hoping today maybe you could impart some of those qualities and some of the wisdom and how you stay so cool in the middle of some of these difficult family situations with some of our listeners. So I wonder where we should kick off the conversation today. I think you'd identified that like maybe a good place to start would be like, what first of all makes family matter so hard, and what might be the hardest part for clients emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with clients, then I guess, sort of get into what makes lawyers stressed out and squirm and that kind of thing too.
Uh-huh.
I had a temper when I was younger, and so people that knew me when I was a kid are kind of surprised that would be the reputation that I have, that I'm this calm guy. But my parents got me into refereeing soccer and basketball to try and get used to kind of criticism and getting thick skin and that kind of thing. So I think that helped me. You got used to people just yelling at you all the time and like second guessing every decision you ever made. That's right. Which, sometimes helps in court, right? You have to sometimes make quick decisions and sort of be confident in what you say, even if, you're sort of wavering inside. For family law, I tell my clients, roughly speaking, the legal system is, to noblemen originally back 1,000 years ago fighting over a piece of land, right? Lots of money, they can throw money at it and spend time on it. And one of them will walk away in the end with the land and one won't, and they'll move on and their lives will still be, better than everyone else's. And that's, in some ways what the court system is still like today, as we know, and if you have to litigate, you're there to fight the other person. It is what we call an adversarial system. And that doesn't really work with families. We're fighting about children. We're fighting about, matrimonial assets that you're, sort of splitting up your own pie. You're fighting over your own pie and spending money on lawyers. And so it's, to really kind of get client expectations in terms of what this is going to look like. It's going to be emotional. These are, people that spent years together, sometimes decades together, and so it comes with the territory. And this isn't something they teach you in law school, really. Is a lot of client management. It's not just family law. It could apply to other areas of law too, but it's, there's not that kind of practical, you're meeting the client, someone's breaking down crying. They can't, finish their testimony because they're too anxious. These are all just sort of things you kind of have to work with, through experience. So, we can you sort of break it down, even more for clients if you want. And it sort of depends how far you want to get into this. Like there's court, I think, is probably the major stressor for them, court and sort of money and legal fees and how much will this cost. But even, going to, the first meeting with a lawyer, meeting your lawyer, this is the person who's going to, help straighten out your life. What does that look like? Do I know this person? Do I trust this person? How how can I rely on what they're telling me? And really our time and our advice is, our stock and trade, as they say. And so you have to be able to convince people that you're worth spending a fair bit of money on. Right. So, yeah. So I find, and anyone practicing family law, trying to help your client understand. One of the things I find helpful is to say, your life might be really complicated on a day-to-day basis, and it kind of sounds like it is. But from a legal perspective, the main issues that we're dealing with here, it's parenting, it's support, it's property. We can kind of boil it down to some fairly, simple concepts here. And I think part of the issue with the client is they might have things that are very relevant, important to them. And you don't want to say, look, this isn't important, but, it's not important to, discussing it with me and sort of moving past, whose fault it was the relationship ended, or sometimes you'll get clients saying, you must think I'm an idiot. And like, I get that probably every week. I'm like, there's no judgment in this office. I've heard it all, every reason for people getting together and splitting up, and sort of, not much really surprises me anymore. But I think, they're nervous, I think, to be judged, even before you get to the judge judging you, it's your own lawyer judging you. What are they going to think of me? Am I going to sound stupid, or my fear is going to sound, reasonable? And so it's a lot of, sort of active listening and being engaged with them and acknowledging what they're telling you, and trying to, drill down and say, we can work through this. Nothing that you've told me is sort of impossible to achieve. And then you have to kind of, go through the cost and time and the stress and that kind of thing, and figure out, what has to happen here overall. What's the most important? What's the bottom line, so to speak, that they can kind of walk away with.
So there's a lot of, I guess, aspects in there that to talk about a family law file that are probably pretty private for a lot of folks, right? I think you mentioned, reasons for why the relationship broke down. So those are things that were working or not working well in the relationship, probably concerns or worries about parenting, laying finances bare to a person you've just met.
Right.
And all of that entails whether, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what I say to clients. And I try and convey that same message too. I need to know all the information that's relevant, and it's not, I'm not going to judge you for it, but I need to know it so I can give you good legal advice and a good plan forward. So I guess I guess listening to this and knowing the kind of information that they'll have to share coming into a lawyer's office to start off with might just be helpful preparation.
Yeah, I'm going to get the intake forms are intake forms, and you'll get some good information there if the client, if they fill them out correctly, or bother checking their email for them. Sometimes they don't, and that's fine. But at least I'll get some expectation. We do try and make it clear that the financial disclosure is standard in every file. Both parties are going to be doing this. That it's not like we're going to be putting this stuff up on Facebook or TikTok or whatever and showing people your bank accounts and that kind of thing. Sorry, have anyone to chime in?
Yeah, I think clients often don't realize that we have what we call a no-fault divorce system here in Canada. And so I certainly have had clients where they want to tell me about the situation in like what caused the divorce because they want, and therefore I should get, that should be a factor. But I love it when I have no idea why they broke up. That's my favorite.
Yep.
Because I actually don't need to know. And and the thing is, that can be one of the most embarrassing parts about a divorce, right? Is whatever happened. Because even if there was infidelity, for example, if you were the one that cheated, that could be embarrassing. If you were the one that were cheated on, that could be humiliating. And so maybe it can bring some comfort to people before they go to see a lawyer if they're watching this, that, hey, your lawyer doesn't actually care or want to know why you broke up. They just want to help you navigate the consequences of the breakup.
Absolutely. And the corollary to that too is, can the other person stop me from getting divorced? Well, no. That's, sometimes people are upset to hear that the divorce is usually the last thing we get done at the end. And it's really procedural from our point of view. And we need a justice to sign off on it. And that's all we really need. But, there is, and I think, it's good to know that. But also sometimes I think clients feel like they have to justify to you, this is why I'm getting divorced. Okay. But it doesn't matter to me. You can have no reason. It could just be the expiry date in the relationship. There could be, terrible reasons. I agree with you. It's not relevant. I will say, and I think on the files where it's fairly clear, it's going to be pretty amicable. There's mediation or collaborative law, or we've got already sort of a drafted separation agreement. We think we're going to execute pretty quickly. Those types of straightforward files, I agree with you. This is, here's the legal issues. Here's the advice. You need to kind of make a rational decision on this. But no, we don't need to get into the details, unless you feel like telling me something. Litigation files, I find I will usually ask a few questions just to kind of connect the dots, in the background to get a sense of what's going on here. Sometimes people will think, we're going to do a settlement meeting next week. If people are kind of equal partners at the table, that's a lot easier. And people might think they are. And you get some background and say, okay, well, is there some, slight power imbalance here that I have to kind of keep in the back of my mind? And I think, you've got the clients, there's sort of a spectrum of the clients like, they must pay, I need my day in court, I want to fight. And then the clients were like, no, I just want it over with, I don't care, to the point where, they might take a deal that you'd say, this is sort of beyond the minimum, in terms of the range we're looking at. I don't think you should do this. And so I find in terms of more in litigation, I think, but in terms of your approach to the client, I think it is to see, they might say they want to fight. Maybe they don't actually need to once we get, into the legal issues and say, okay, I think you guys are actually pretty close. The agreements that you have or the disagreements blow up, but in terms of legal issues, they're minor. I had a client just recently it was sort of a very kind of engineer black and white. This is a principle. We have to kind of go for it. And I sort of, we got to, let's reduce conflict here. Let's try and avoid litigation. And we're a couple of years later, we're still sort of finalizing everything. But he said, I really appreciate that you managed to kind of get me off this adversarial litigation track and see that there's a way to with fighting about children and things like that you can get there without fighting. And on the other hand, I had a client where, I had to kind of tell her, look, let me kind of fight this for you because I don't think you can, but I think we can get there together. Right. So it sort of depends on the file, depends on the situation. I bring up sort of gently, if I can, were there any issues of domestic violence? It's on the intake form. Does it get checked off? If it does, then I will talk about it. If it's not, men and women, I've started to ask that question in almost every file. Certainly if there's litigation, for sure, especially with the Divorce Act changes now when they talk about sort of a wider range of what they call family violence, financial abuse and emotional abuse and that kind of thing. And again, I tell people I'm not trying to pry, but this might be something that you didn't think was necessarily going to, be relevant, that I might say, okay, well, now I kind of understand the background here, why there's certain things that, you're maybe fixated on that I didn't think were that important. And it helps me to kind of resolve that with them to say, I get this, I hear where you're coming from. And now let's kind of move on to what we can actually, accomplish.
Yeah, that's a good point. Domestic violence is maybe the one exception that may be related to the relationship breakdown that can be relevant for part of the process, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes those circumstances just sort of, I guess, give context to the dynamics that are going on. So they might not be legally relevant, but they can be, I guess, strategically relevant or help you understand where the client's coming from. Sometimes if they're, like you said, Dustin, sometimes so eager to resolution, or the opposite end, right? They just don't want to put down the sword. And it can be helpful to give a little bit of, some of the context around that.
Yeah. So difficulty number one for clients. Opening up to the lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then going on from there, I think that it depends, and you're going to sort of experience more problems in litigation files. So I guess I'll sort of assume we're talking more about issues where you're going to court, and that's also I think the biggest fear for the client. What does it mean? What does going to court mean? Is the judge going to yell at me? Am I going to have to talk to the judge? There's a lot of areas there we could get into in terms of court. I was thinking about this, even the perception sometimes, and I'm kind of a friendly guy, and especially when we were still, doing court in person, I'd see a lawyer there, see Heather there, and we'd have a file together and say, hey, go over and have a smile on my face and sit down next to her and kind of chat. And the client's like, why were you talking to the other lawyer? Then it's even worse because, of course, we refer to each other as my friend when we're, presenting before the court. And so that also confuses the heck out of clients. You told me this was an adversarial system and now you're calling the other lawyer a friend? What does that mean? I'm like, okay, great. So there's definitely some explaining that kind of goes into this, to tell the client, this is what it's going to look like. It's not like, unfortunately, life is not like Ally McBeal. We're pretty civilized most of the time and not too much drama. Sometimes there is, and some lawyers get kind of carried away, and we can kind of, touch base on that later. But it's, I think, getting the client to understand most of the time court's pretty boring and pretty procedural, and we're prepared, and it's, it's not going to be certainly none of the sort of minor applications and, chambers, that kind of thing. Special chambers are fairly straightforward. It's not going to be some, melodramatic, courtroom scene. Sometimes you do get some unexpected outbursts and things like that. There's no doubt there. But for clients, so that's the other thing. Court's expensive. What are the expectations? And you'll get people asking you, what kind of, are you like a shark? Are you, a real, litigator? I'm like, well, no, if that's who you want, I can probably send you to a few people I like that are like that and enjoy going to court and really get into that. But, and trying to explain the concept of what does winning versus losing mean in family, right? And going back to, if you're fighting over a piece of land, great, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. Or maybe they cut the piece of land in half, so to speak. But, winning in family law, I had a file where a lady was bringing a guardianship application for her nephew, and it was going to have to go to trial, and went through the process. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to testify. You'll get cross-examined. She's going to have to testify. It's we're kind of there to say, this is why you need to be a guardian, because the other person maybe isn't the best parent. And, kind of 2 days before the trial, she said, I don't want to go through with this because I think even if I win and become a guardian, the relationship will be damaged and it might be sort of harder going forward. And so she kind of just abandoned her claim. And I said, I appreciate that. That's the difficulty sometimes, is we're there to fight. These people have relationships that are ongoing. And so, going through that with the client, what are you trying to accomplish here? What's the best interest of the children? What's, appropriate support, that kind of thing. So there's some confusion sometime on the part of the client in terms of sort of, I guess, the role of the court and the role of the lawyer and that kind of thing.
I don't think I've ever heard a lawyer that, was someone that I respected. I'm like, this is a good lawyer, refer to themselves as being a shark, or like somebody who's like, I get in there and I'm going to, So I don't know. because, you know, that is something often we hear from clients. I mean, what do you have to say about that? Like, why is that? Do you think that they want that? And then is that actually what they want? Or, you know, is it better to not be really kind of contrary, even in the court system? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I, you know, I was talking about Ally McBeal and, you know, sort of flippantly, but I think I would say from my experience with the American system, it's a bit more dramatic, you know, maybe not sort of fist pounding on the table kind of thing, but you'll get sort of more dramatic presentation. We're obviously, we all as lawyers know that we kind of take after the British tradition, referring to each other as my friend, my lord, my lady. Oh, that's, you know, starting to get outdated a little bit. But the idea of your reputation maybe has some value, and the lawyers understand this and the judges understand this, and they used to be lawyers, obviously, but for the client to understand, you know, you don't need me to be there pounding on the table for you. That's not going to convince the court. They need to rule on evidence. And some people do want that bulldog or that shark to be litigious, and sometimes there is a fight, and sometimes there's hurt feelings there, and it's people talk about it being, you know, it's the principle of the thing, and then you say, here's what my hourly rate is, here's how long it's going to take to get to court, and by the way, when we go in front of the judge, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. We got about a 50-50 chance, right? So then, is it still the principle? And for some people, it is. You know, for some people, there is some, you know, some emotional and psychological value that we might not see as sort of a rational, you know, bystander. Say, why are you taking this all the way? But because they need to, for this one time, you know, they can't give in. They need to, even if they lose, they're not giving in, right? And so that's, you know, you don't want to take things to court that don't have a reasonable chance of success. I don't think the court appreciates that. And as a lawyer, you know, you're thinking about your profession, you're thinking about your colleagues, and you know, you don't want to be labeled as somebody who's, you know, will just kind of take anything to the courts, you know, for $1. But the client perspective, I think, is I need someone who's going to fight for me. Well, I'll fight for you. I'll just do it in maybe more of like a Jedi-like way than you're expecting, and not, you know, not sort of yelling and screaming. So.
Right.
I like that. A Jedi way.
Not the Sith way.
No. Although sometimes it would be fun, you know, just sort of bash your keyboard. Sometimes we lose our tempers, but, and that's, you know, I think that just going back to, you know, what I was saying about, you know, seeing somebody like Heather at the courthouse and saying, hey, you know, and being happy to see them and telling the client, you know, these are my colleagues, and some of them, yes, I am friends with, and we're all professional. We have to do our best for, you know, for our clients. And sometimes, you know, I've had clients that would left me or fired me because they thought maybe I was too close to the other lawyer. And again, that's that perception. Well, you're not really fighting for me. I'm like, oh, no, I'm prepared. Like we're ready to take this. I got my arguments. I think we're good to go with the court, but it's that perception. And sometimes, you know, I forget to tell clients that. And so when they go into court and you know, see me being collegial and the other lawyers, and, oh, you guys were laughing and joking. And like, well, yeah, we're going to be sitting here for 3 hours and there's not much we can do. So we'll shut up, you know, go for a coffee after, and just explaining to clients sometimes, you know, these are colleagues that I will be working with, you know, for years to come. You know, the family bar is still, it's, I think, probably bigger than when I started, but it's still pretty small in the city and the outlying areas. And most of the specialists, we see each other, you know, every few weeks or months. And so it's just good to have that working relationship. And you know, for the client to understand, if I have a good working relationship with the lawyer, sometimes the negotiation goes more smoothly, right? And so that's, sometimes the clients don't understand that. You're a hired gun, you're there to do, you know, what I tell you, and I want you to go fight for me. And okay. And some can understand pretty quickly after a 2-minute conversation how that works, and some just you know, and the feel needs to be right too. And I usually tell clients at the first meeting, you know, if they're man or woman, or, you know, would you feel more comfortable with a female lawyer? I got thick skin. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Right. You need to have someone that you're comfortable with, because, you know, even if we don't get into the you know, the sort of sordid details of their lives, so to speak, you know, I think they still have to trust us and say, okay, I accept this person's advice. I accept this person's going to help me. And so if the fit's not right, and people do need different personalities, right? So as I say, you know, some clients want to fight, some clients don't want to fight, and you can sort of shift your role as a lawyer, but they need that kind of impression from you to fit with I guess what they want.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think it would probably be a bad sign if like you enter the courtroom with your lawyer and your lawyer starts turning red because they can't stand the sight of the other lawyer on the other side. I think that's probably, that's not going to go very well, because then now you're dealing with all your lawyer's baggage it's now thrown into the whole thing, which is not ideal. I think you want your lawyer to be clear-minded and to not be emotionally invested. That's like one of the big things that you're hiring a lawyer for, is to somebody who's not emotionally involved in your situation. And if their emotions start getting keyed up because of the lawyer on the other side of the file, you're going to end up paying for that, I would think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, if we talk about lawyers staying cool, Evan, I totally agree. I don't know. Can we talk about this? Is it, it's at least a well-known fact in our field between, colleagues, that everyone's kind of got their list, so to speak, of the people that they know they're going to have difficulty with. The clients could be great. And you see that lawyer's name and you're like, oh man, we just don't mesh. There's going to be sparks there. We're all, lawyers are often a weird type A, type B mix, and we all like to be right all the time. And sometimes that, lends itself to conflict between lawyers. But then my list is pretty small, but I got to say, even for me, and I am a pretty chill guy, I do really enjoy most lawyers, and even the quirky personalities I find, have something to offer. But there are a few people where I find it so difficult. And I know it's going to be just a grind, and the clients can be paying for things that they shouldn't have to, because, either there's a lack of efficiency or just, those people that just want to kind of grind it out and make as much as they can in terms of legal fees. It's not how I operate, try and get it done efficiently for the client. So there now at this stage in my career, there's a few names, of course, I won't mention, but I'll tell the client, I don't work well with this person, and we don't mesh, and I'm going to refer you on to a couple people I think, will work very well with this lawyer. It's not me. The other side's a good lawyer, but we're going to clash, and it's going to end up costing you kind of more time and money and stress, because, as you say, Evan, like, it's just, if you're giving their sober second thought and all of a sudden you're emotionally invested because of that other lawyer, then you're getting off track. You're not going to be as rational and focused and balanced as you're supposed to be. And that's really what the court wants from you. They don't want that. And they get it, and we've all been there, and we've all been, turning red a little bit in the courtroom when something gets said that you think is, a dig at you or maybe misleading the court, and you kind of just have to be professional. And I explain to clients as well, actually, on that point, we are officers of the court. Again, it's just, what does that mean? And it's, well, I'm a professional. I'm not just, your lawyer. I'm not just a hired gun. When I'm in the court, I kind of have to, be part of the court and help the judge understand what's going on. And I have, decorum and professionalism standards that I have to kind of adhere to. And we're all human. We don't get there every time, but it's good for the client to understand that too. You know what? I might have to, that lawyer made a mistake, and you know what? I might have to correct them, because I want the court to understand what's actually going on and not to make an order, even if it favors me, that's based on some misapprehension. That's hard for the client to understand. I want to win. We had them there. They made a mistake. I'm like, yeah, they said 5 million instead of 50 million. Okay, well, let's tell the court, no, that my friend just slipped up. And that's a tough thing for a client to swallow, saying, hey, I'm here to win. I'm paying you a bunch of money. Why are you helping them? I'm like, well, I'm helping the court, right? I'm not helping them. I'm helping the court. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's a weird job.
It is. And I can just translate for the average listener out there. Dustin just very diplomatically described how to say that other person's a total jerk. And I don't want to work with them ever. But instead, he says it a much nicer way, a much more professional way. But if you hear him say that, your significant other has hired a total jerk of a lawyer.
That's probably true.
How do you know if a lawyer cares about you?
If a lawyer cares about you?
Positively or negatively, Kim?
Positively. So like Evan was talking before about you don't want a lawyer who's emotionally invested, but I mean, it's human nature. I mean, you can see it with parents and their kids. And parents will do anything for their kids because they're emotionally invested. So people know that, right? So they want their lawyer to be on their side, engaged with them, so they have a favorable outcome. And I was sitting here listening to all this going on, and I think I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I know I'm not a lawyer. And I'm wondering, as somebody who, let's say I got divorced one day, how would I know if if my lawyer actually cares about me. Like, what are the tells that they're doing a good job? If they're cool as a cucumber and I can't tell if they're with emotions.
It's a great question. And that is, I guess, what did I refer to being like a Jedi? I guess you sort of want the Zen type of monk-like calm detachment, but I agree at a certain point, you get too far removed. And, one of the things we talk about in our profession is what we call compassion fatigue, right? That it's difficult going through all but the sort of most collaborative files that they're draining, and I'm mostly an introvert, I would say. Lawyers are kind of a weird mix, and most people aren't exactly one or the other. But I used to think, well, an introvert meant that I didn't want to go out and talk to people. That's not me. No, it's that it takes energy, right? And so you start to get drained, and if you don't take breaks, you get to this compassion fatigue point, and you kind of do stop caring about the client. And, you have to kind of, hopefully it sort of have colleagues around. One of the dangers, I think, of being, completely solo practitioner is that you need someone to kind of say, like, are you okay? It kind of seems like you're just getting a little glazy eyed here and sort of dismissing what the client's saying. And so you get sort of so far detached. It's like, well, I don't really care what happens. Well, that's not good. And a judge once told me early in my career, he said, if you ever stop getting nervous, even just a little bit nervous going into court, it means you might have to retire, because it means you don't care. And I was like, ooh, okay. And I still do get, nervous. Everyone gets keyed up. And that's one of the things, of course, you tell your client. The judge will be keyed up, the lawyers will be keyed up, the clients there will be keyed up. But it's, I think if you are dismissing a client's concerns and not listening to them, I think that's probably a sign. There is information we don't need to know. We don't necessarily need to know their life story, but when they bring up concerns, if they're just sort of summarily dismissed by the lawyer, that's probably a bad sign. At the same time, there's a spectrum for everything. And so if you, just like we talked about, if you have a volatile relationship with the other lawyer, if we're talking about, remember, the theme is sort of staying cool, I guess, as a lawyer now, we're sort of jumping from client to lawyer, is you can't get emotionally invested in your client and their outcome to such an extent that, again, you start to lose your cool. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be detached. And as Evan said, hey, you're here to provide, that sort of outside advice of someone who's saying, from a rational perspective, this is an acceptable compromise, or this is kind of what we need to focus on and kind of move past that. But, we all work better with some people than others, and there's some clients I think I'm probably really good friends with outside of court and outside of my practice, just because we really hit it off, and you just have a natural kind of chemistry and same interests, or just have a real good dialogue, a real good feeling about them. And so, do I like those clients better? Well, I guess, can we be honest here? I mean, if you like your client and you think they're a neat person, or they're somebody who's maybe suffered some bad things that happened to them, or got some kind of unjust outcome in the past, you want to work a little bit harder for them, right? And certainly, the part of the attraction, I guess, of when we worked at Legal Aid, I think, was that it was kind of that sort of social justice work, and so compassion fatigue there was, you're dealing with some pretty difficult clients, a lot of child welfare work where there's people with mental health issues, addictions issues, fetal alcohol kind of issues, that kind of thing, or just clients that don't have the skills, right? That they, you tell them, don't call me 10 times a week. It's not helpful for anybody. And, they still kind of have to do that. And so that, there is that sort of reward, I think, to help people that need that kind of assistance. That's so sort of caring for the client, I guess. I'm here because I care, or I wouldn't be doing, this type of file. I do work as counsel for children. I know Jeff Keller was on one of the previous shows talking about that, and that's these are files where the parents are fighting, so they're not easy files, but it's worthwhile trying to assist these children in getting kind of as good an outcome as we can. So there's part of it, I think, is I guess, in the work that you do. I like to stay involved sort of in domestic violence files and emergency protection orders. I have a lot of experience in those files, and those are people I think, I don't need to sort of care about the client beyond they need help in this, difficult situation. So if the client doesn't think you care, I think that's probably an issue, even if you do care. And, how are you demonstrating that without being too caught up in their case where you get now yourself emotionally invested in the outcome. And we're kind of taught, you're not, yes, fist pumping if you win your application in court. It's bad form, right? It just looks bad. You want to be kind of a good winner and a good loser. And it's easier to do that when you're not as invested. I've had times where I've had some, I think, pretty bad decisions against me, even if they're not necessarily, at the level where I'd appeal the decision. I kind of felt like it wasn't heard, or I was, dismissed, or the judge was, maybe hangry and just needed to grab a bite to eat before hearing our case. I don't know, and the clients, understandably upset after what happened. Well, what happened? Why did we lose? Why didn't they listen to what you were saying? And so, if you're emotionally invested and you care too much, then you will be upset too. And we all get there. We all have files where some wins are more important than others, I guess. And that's how you kind of navigate that yourself through experience. Again, not stuff that you get taught in law school. You kind of just have to go through the process as a lawyer.
Kim, I would answer it a little bit differently. I would say it doesn't matter so much about whether the client cares or whether the lawyer cares about you or not. I would say, are they responsive to you? Right? Do they hear what you're saying? Do they understand? And do they communicate well with you? And when they advocate for you, are they an extension of your voice? Are they saying, if you're in court, are they advocating effectively on your behalf? You can do all those things without, and sometimes they're easier, just like Dustin was talking about, if there's not a huge emotional investment. Because emotion does start to can definitely cloud, your rational side, and can make you do things. Emotion always makes us do things that we wouldn't otherwise do if we weren't feeling emotional. So I would say, do you have a good feeling when you're meeting with your lawyer? Do you feel like they're blowing you off? That's clearly a red flag, right? If they're just okay, don't worry, we got this. Pay your bill on the way out. That's probably not a great relationship to be entering into. But beyond that, I think you can tell by, are you getting the level of service that you expect from somebody that you're paying, like your lawyer?
Yeah, and I'll try and tell clients, stuff gets on the back burner, and it's especially in family law. Often we're dealing with kind of, you have your 5 things that you're going to get done that day, and maybe you get 2 or 3 of them done because something blows up and you got to deal with it, right? And so I tell my clients sometimes, the unfortunate thing for you is that you've got a pretty good routine going, and you're a good stable client that trusts me, and so you kind of get put on the back burner. And so in another way, I guess, is showing them caring and saying, I'm sorry it's taking longer, and that's my fault, and not just trying to brush that off, saying no, I'm busy, too bad. You just have to deal with that. To acknowledge you want to get this done, acknowledge it's expensive, time consuming, that kind of thing. I think that's another way of showing you care, to say hey, I realize I probably should have been a little quicker on the ball and getting back to you, and I'm sorry, I'm busy, but you also deserve that kind of treatment too. So. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Heather?
Well, I actually have a question for Kim, because I'm curious about what led her to ask that question. Because I wonder if are you sort of is that feedback you've heard from people that they didn't feel cared about by their lawyer? Or is that something that you're thinking you'd like if you had to go through that? Or I guess I'm just curious.
Well, I'll tell you what led me to that in a quick second.
Yeah.
But I think we know that there's different personality types that are attracted to others. I've done a ton of sales training in my life, and we're taught a lot about different personalities and how you relate to them, or whether you should even try or not. And I think that goes the same thing. That's for sure on the financial services, because you've got a recurring relationship with that person. But even so, on the legal side, if you feel a certain way about certain types of people, you're probably going to be more attracted to that. If somebody shows empathy and that resonates with you, you're going to go with the empathetic lawyer. If somebody is stone cold, they might be better, but in the relationship side of things, it's just not going to be a match. But the reason I was thinking about it is because I had a client not too long ago was asking about basically kind of the same thing. Like, how do I know you care about my money? And the answer is a little bit more like Evan's, where being emotional while trading securities is not a good place to be. So for us, like lots of people I know joke about how I'm dead inside because I don't cry at movies and stuff like that.
Lots of people joke about how you're dead inside?
Well, because I'm not an emotional person. And for me in my career choice, like it's a perfect match in terms of making good, reasonable, rules-based decisions for my clients' money. Even though I do care deeply for them, that is a really important component in my line of work. And I was kind of curious, like, I was just thinking.
All right, Kim, meet ma.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I could see like, yeah, I care about your money so much. I'm going to chase this trade to the bottom. Get you out of the absolute bottom.
We'll get you out.
But I mean, lawyers are all different types of people. And I think a lot of people who aren't lawyers wouldn't think too much. I mean, nobody has a playbook on divorce. No one knows how to do it. That's why it's scary and uncomfortable. And you don't get the playbook until you meet with somebody or listen to our podcast or whatnot. So I think like it's a scary process and people are trying to figure out who is the right match for them, how they do this the best way possible without making too many mistakes, and just kind of feeling out the lawyers and how they're different people. And they certainly are interacting as a group much more than many other professionals out there. Stockbrokers aren't meeting with stockbrokers talking about, like, we don't share clients and are talking about the clients together. Accountants, that's a very independent world as well. They're not right. Outside of, when they get together for their wild parties, they're not usually meeting together with other accountants to talk about a client that they share together. Family law is a very unique area where you guys are interacting all the time. And certainly it's a really important skill to be able to like learn how to get along with your colleagues that you're bumping into all the time, plus learn to work with clients too. Like you guys are getting tested all the time. And I just like, that stresses me out, your job. It seems so.
Thank you for noticing, Kim.
It's so involved.
Yeah.
It's so involved.
I feel heard and acknowledged.
I feel appreciated right now. Thank you, Kim.
And I think on that note, Kim, I mean, you'll see as a lawyer, referral will come in or someone will come in for a consultation and you'll be lawyer 3 or 4 or 5 of theirs on the file. Red flag immediately. Particularly if I look at the other names and if it's, Heather and Evan and, some, other people I know, I'd be like, okay, these are good, reasonable people that aren't going to rip you off, that are specialists. Now, why is that happening? Sometimes it is the fit. And I've had, clients say it's not working anymore. We get, at a previous firm, we, once every month or two, we would kind of pick our most difficult files and say, let's trade. What are you doing on this file? Well, I'm kind of stuck. This is where we're at. I can't make any headway. And the other lawyer will say, well, did you try this? I'm like, oh man, I never thought of that. Right. Just sometimes you need a fresh perspective. So the fact that somebody is on their second or third lawyer, especially if it's, a file that's 5 years old, is not unheard of, but certainly as the lawyer, like, okay, so why is that? Is it this client? Is it the other side? Is it that there's just, every possible issue they could fight about in family law, they are fighting about. So that's, that it's not just sort of, lawyers sort of being colleagues. And it's often that, if I'm the fourth file and I see Heather was a previous lawyer, I might call her and say, what am I dealing with here? Is this just need to be sort of pushed towards the end? We're just got one last thing to get there, or are there sort of, are there issues I need to know about? I guess I'm giving out trade secrets here in some ways, but the line in our profession is, the client is the enemy sometimes, right? Is that managing client expectations, getting them, to understand why what you're saying is rational and can work for you if you just trust me. And so that's, sometimes it just like where the two lawyers don't mesh well together, you're going to meet with the client and say, like, I literally can't work with you. And so, it's a job where, clients can certainly fire lawyers, but sometimes lawyers fire clients and say, we're done. Something's broke. We say the relationship is broken down. Right. And if the court's wondering, that's kind of what we say and just make it vague like that, the judge can probably read between the lines. But, sometimes we have to remove ourselves and say, I don't think we can continue to work in this role anymore.
Yeah, because it is a relationship too, right? It's not just a contract. Yeah. I mean, right there in that phrase, right? The relationship is broken down. That sounds pretty, that sounds pretty emotional and pretty like on that soft level, right? It's not like, well, they've violated a term of the contract between us, which sometimes is what it is. But yeah, I think I think a lot of things are true in that there's so much variability in personalities that finding that fit is important, especially if you're going through something that's protracted. I mean, if you're getting doing 2 meetings and getting some advice on an agreement that's already drafted, that's probably going to be less important than, like Dustin has pointed out, if there are issues of domestic violence, if there's really complicated things, if you're going to be working with this lawyer for years. I think those kinds of softer side personality things are probably going to be more important because, it's the journey, not just the destination, right?
That's right.
How you get there is going to affect how you feel about the outcome too.
And I think, we have been focusing on litigation, and I think that's just sort of natural because those are the protracted, files where people are fighting about things. I mean, not the only time, but one of the only times I think this would come up in sort of a more amicable setting is, sometimes you'll get asked to do what's called independent legal advice, or ILA, to sort of sign off on an agreement for someone. Somebody else has drafted it. They need a lawyer to give them some, an hour's worth of legal advice and sign the agreement. And I think the only time where I might push a little bit is when, you read this agreement and as an experienced lawyer, you spend 10 minutes and you're already like, okay, I don't like this agreement. This is not even, what the law would contemplate on sort of the bare facts here. And the client's like, oh, I just want to sign. I just want to sign. One lady was like, it was a prenup. It was just not great. And she's like, well, I'm getting married in Hawaii next week, and if I don't sign this, the wedding's off. And I'm like, okay, we can do this, and maybe against my legal advice because it had to be done. But that's the only time I think that sort of relationship on sort of a real quick basis is I'm seeing some red flags here. Closure is important, but when you're like, I need to sign. Okay, well, let's talk about why that needs to happen. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's these litigation files that, and some very good, very experienced family lawyers say, I want to get out of the litigation stream. Heather, you might be one of them, and get into a more sort of, sort of fulfilling, less stressful, grind in litigation, because it is a grind, and it's disappointing and stressful. Sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it's entertaining, but it's, as a lawyer, it does take a toll on you as well. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess I'm curious, Kim, too, about like I was thinking too, that like there's, and it's something I've maybe struggled to, or have tried to balance throughout my career, and still am trying to find the sweet spot. But, my job is rewarding and I love it because I get to meet with so many different people and have so many different interactions and find out so many stories and see how people tick. And that's really, and when I can help someone, especially if I've gotten to know them and I care about them, that's where the rewards for me come from, personally, from my job. But I have to watch that line too of over-identifying or, going down the road with them, like striking that empathy versus is sympathy the next one, where like you don't want to be, you want to acknowledge, you want the person to hear that you see their situation, but you don't necessarily want to get in their shoes and walk down that road with them, right? So, yeah.
In a way, you want, like, isn't it a psychopath that can't feel empathy? Is that
sociopath, I think? Or
yeah. That's, I mean, theoretically, a sociopath could be a great lawyer, but I think you touched on it too, Kim, right? That relationships are complex, and you've got to find a good fit, and not everyone's going to be a good fit. They could be a fantastic lawyer, but not a fantastic lawyer for you.
Yeah. There's a YouTube series on a woman who's a psychopath, and she talks about, she's a lawyer, and she talks about her life very matter-of-factly and how she gets through things and how she does her job. It's actually quite fascinating to listen to. And you can see why lawyers, like why psychopaths would be attracted to the law and excel in that area.
Sure, you have control over people. You have that sort of that fiduciary relationship where you have control. You can tell a person what to do and that they'll follow your advice. I can see that for sure.
You don't get upset. You don't get upset if somebody doesn't like you. It's just a very calm place to be in your brain, I think.
Right.
As long as a psychopath is ethical, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we can pick up the sword.
Yeah, there's that joke about, I think, middle managers have a lot of the same psychological characteristics as sociopaths. So, I mean, it's
right.
They're out there. I don't want to watch this YouTube series. I don't want anything to hit too close to home there. Oh, that's why I'm so detached. Okay, it's not Jedi at all. It's much worse than that.
Well, and Dustin, I think what I described you at the beginning is like chill and calm. I don't think you're calm in that sort of uncaring kind of way. I think you are, a good advocate for your clients, but without getting overly emotional or angry or, falling into aggressiveness or any of those kinds of things when it's not necessary.
One of the high points of my legal career is that right before my wife was going to go into labor and I had to make an application, I just told the judge, like, look, sir, I'm a little rattled today. My wife's about to, give birth. And so sorry if I'm kind of, not as coherent as I usually am. He's like, oh, Tkachuk, you're usually the most unflappable guy in the courthouse. And I'm like, really? Thank you. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Nice.
But actually, I was going to ask, I guess, particularly Evan and Heather as lawyers, what gets you rattled? We talked, sort of about what is difficult for clients emotionally, and we talked about lawyers. Those lawyers you're just going to bash heads with. We know, whoever's on that list, it's going to be a fight. But I guess what else is in terms of staying cool as a lawyer? What sort of rattles you?
Oh, it's a great question.
Allow me to answer your question with a question.
It depends on the day. I'm going to think about it for a minute.
Okay,
Evan,
you can think
do you have something?
I know already. Yeah, I've always, all my life, I've had adverse reaction to bullies. So, and I've never been a very big guy. I'm pretty slight of build, although I'm 6 feet tall. But growing up as a little kid, it's a talent for getting under people's skin. And if I was ever bullied, usually I ended up fighting them when I was a kid. I got in a lot of fights as a little kid, which is funny because I'm not that way at all as an adult, but I was very quick to start throwing punches, I guess. But so it's still that bullying type of behavior still is the thing that I have to check my emotions on. And, most of the time I'm successful at doing that and talking my client down. Because if I'm upset about the bullying, my client, it's like way worse for my client.
Right.
They feel totally insulted and upset about it. And, I have to talk them down. And that probably helps me as well. Having to talk my client down, also helps me deal with it. Like, look, I know that was totally unnecessary, but just cut through all that garbage and really at the heart of it, where here's the issue. And this is what they're saying. They just put a lot of garbage in there along with it. But I think that's the biggest challenge for me when it comes to controlling my emotions is if there's a bully on the other side of the file, my instinct is to bring a bigger hammer, which, by the way, is not that's not the solution. So,
on that point, I just thought of another thing that would set clients off. Besides the bullying, is going back to trying to keep them on what's relevant, particularly when you're doing, affidavits, written materials for court, and the other side is throwing in,
inflammatory stuff,
or here's 3 text messages and make me look real bad, ignoring the other 5,000 that were all fine. And so, your client wants to blow their lid, understandably. It's purely inflammatory. And we got to respond to this. Let's bring a bigger hammer. I've seen adult type photographs or things like that attached for almost no reason to affidavits. And as a lawyer, we know that we can apply to strike certain things. And sometimes, you do that if it's egregious enough, but that's another thing sort of setting clients off is, well, that's totally inflammatory and that's not true. And that's something you have to kind of guide them past too. And the other thing that kind of comes up, in terms of, that's not true is, I tell clients, starting out as a lawyer, people swear an oath, and I'll tell the truth, nothing but the truth, or they sort of that effect for their affidavit. They're sworn under oath that they're telling the truth. And oh my gosh, people are lying under oath all the time. Oh no, this is perjury. It's perjury. Court, do something, right? And the older I got, I was like, but when you start to cross-examine them on it, or you say, okay, you said this happened, but here's a document I'm showing you that shows clearly the opposite with, just facts, just facts. That didn't happen. And people were mostly confused and would just sort of think. And the more studies you read about memory and how we think the lady was wearing a red dress when she stole my bike. Well, no, she wasn't. And it wasn't a lady, that, and it just, I tell my clients, you're going to see some things either on the stand or from them at a settlement meeting or in an affidavit that you think is lies. And I'm going to tell you, I think they probably think it's true. And that's really hard for people to understand. And it's hard for me I think I'm a, rational observer. And so I'd be a great witness that, if I saw something happen, but my memory is just as bad as everyone else's. So that's another thing in terms of client stress is, he just lied about whatever the issue was. Okay. I know you don't agree with what he said. It doesn't mean that, that it is a lie. And that's, I guess as a lawyer too, that kind of thing, gets you rattled too. Especially coming from another lawyer, if they're sort of, misrepresenting something to the court is, unethical, and you don't want to lose your cool, but you have to sort of tell the court, hold on here. Let's look at what actually happened. My friend said this, that's not the case. And you got to be professional, because you don't want to make things worse, but that's, that's an issue. I think about, in terms of getting rattled, quick timelines, you got a file where you got court kind of the next day, and I tend to be more stressed about that. I don't really know the file. Am I going to sound dumb in front of the judge? Maybe I don't have the exact ages of the kids and that kind of thing. So anybody have that kind of experience where you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do this properly. I'm going to fail somehow. Is that been on your experience, Heather?
Yeah, I think as I was thinking about this question, and going through sort of the things that rattle me, I think it's not necessarily one action or thing. I think it's often if something comes in and it's unexpected, or imposes a quick turnaround, or is it a time that I'm already very busy and stuff's going on. And really at the bottom of my heart, if I could be working on everybody's file all at once and doing an excellent job for them, I would be, right? But you only have so many hands to juggle things at once. So if I'm already halfway through some document and I know I'm meeting with someone in 15 minutes and something else happens, and then I get an email that's like, alarm, they didn't pay the car insurance bill, right? And then sometimes I can get, depending on the tenor of it too, sometimes I can get irritated. And I think, Dustin, what you said also reminds me too, is sometimes I'll read that email quickly. Maybe it's not about car insurance, but something, right? Or maybe it's from the other lawyer that's like, your client hasn't done what they said they do, and right? And sometimes in that moment, I can become so flooded and irritated, and then come back to it 15 minutes later and realize, oh, that email didn't even say what I thought it said, or it actually isn't in a snarky tone. It's because I'm already doing 19 things and that was number 20. So I think that for me, that's my personal thing that will set me over the edge most times. But all caps, also all caps emails, that does get me too. So don't do that. Just don't.
Well, I know what formatting I'm going to use from now on for my emails to you.
Evan, don't you dare yell at me in an email.
Yeah, Dustin, I'm a firm believer too, and I'd like your take on this is to see how you've seen this work out in the real world. But I'm a firm believer that when the other side is trying to inflame things and making inflammatory remarks, that if my client's able to hold the line and cut through and focus only on the relevant aspects, that just makes them look so much better in the eyes of the court when it comes time to deal with things. Yeah.
Looking, that phrase, coming into court with clean hands, so to speak, I use that one a lot to sort of help clients understand. So much of the law in family law, as we know, is really kind of just arguing the facts. And if you look like the more reasonable person, then sometimes that goes a long way. I had the client, I was representing him in a restraining order, and we were just in chambers. And usually if there's disagreement, as we know, the court will say, well, I've just read these these brief papers. I can't make a decision. Let's set it down for trial. And you tell your client, you just go in there, you just look at the judge, just, don't gasp or cry or groan if something doesn't go your way. Just kind of look composed. And he was just sitting there glaring at the other party. And the judge is like, I'm confirming this for a year. I'm like, what? Like, are we supposed to have a trial? And she's like, no, I can tell just from your client's own demeanor, Mr. Tkachuk, that he's, a danger and a threat to this person because he's glaring at her in open court and is just, staring at her. And so, that can really make a difference with the judge. Or if you're in a trial, you're always sort of prepping your client. You're, again, going back to, you're going to hear stuff that you don't like. Don't sit there, roll your eyes or lean back in your chair or toss your pen and as lawyers, we want to do that sometimes too. The lawyer on the other side's making a point and taking maybe 20 minutes to make the point when it could have been done in 30 seconds. You want to kind of just start tapping your pen. just stay calm.
Yeah. I've got a question about lawyer relationships with their clients. We haven't talked about...
We don't sleep with our clients, Kim. We can't.
Well, you can, but they can't be your clients anymore.
Do you guys have these odd scenarios where sometimes you maybe almost feel like you're a parent to your client, where you're proud of them in some moments and just completely like disgusted with them in others, or like having to nag them? Like, what kind of relationship are people looking for? What's the ultimate like style of relationship you should aim for with like lawyer client?
That's a good question. It's still supposed to be, I think, professional. We are professionals. You can go see a dermatologist who's a specialist and you can get along with them, but it's not that you'd expect to kind of be best friends. You're there for sort of a particular service. So I think, again, as we've said, family law is different. It's its own unique sort of beast, so to speak. And I think there's a greater level of sort of maybe trust and advice that has to kind of come in than if you're dealing with a lawyer for, just a corp. You want to make a number company, very straightforward transaction. You can still get along with that lawyer, but the advice and the transaction and completing that legal matter is a lot more sort of factual. So I think if you're, I'm gonna have to think about that one. If you're getting to the point where you feel like a parent, that's probably not a good sign. Because either you're getting too emotionally invested or something's gone off track enough that maybe you're getting some compassion fatigue and you're starting to get irritated at your teenage kid client, so to speak, that they're acting like a teenager or whatever. So that's a really good point. I haven't really, I'll have to sort of think about it and give a better answer some other time. But what's sort of timbre are you looking for in your relationship with your client? I guess I would say, professional, cordial, warm, even, there's that, what's the, divorce movie with Adam Driver where he, tells Ellen Alda, am I paying you $500 for that stupid joke or whatever? And it's like, I get it, because you're spending money on the lawyer and you don't want to sit there chatting, your life away that you're paying for, but you also need to build up that rapport because they need to trust you and believe that that you're working for them. That's a long way of saying, I don't know.
I think, Kim, I would agree with Dustin that the parent-child analogy, like if you're there, I think it's probably not great. I can't think of any clients where I have that type of a relationship with. Like, certainly sometimes my clients will do things that I've told them not to do. And if it's egregious enough or something that's like kind of a core part of my advice and strategy, then that's enough to end the relationship. But most of the time it's just like, well, okay, I mean, you did that and I told you what would happen and now it's happening. But like, I just kind of sigh and okay, that's what we're doing now. I think the relationship tends to be more collaborative. I think that's the best way because like I'm not making the decisions for them, except for things maybe about court procedure because that's my job. But like the decisions about whether or not to accept an offer or things like that, like I am agnostic about what they choose to do. They can choose to accept a terrible deal and I will sign the certificate of independent legal advice and help get it done as long as they've heard my advice, they understand the consequences, and I'm satisfied they understand the consequences. They can agree with it. They can do whatever they want. So, Yeah, that's how I look at it more like the ideal is a situation where they trust me and but they feel like I understand them, and I feel like I understand them, and it's a collaborative relationship. I'm doing things that they can't or don't want to do, but ultimately they're the ones making the decisions about what they're going to accept because it's their life. I don't know, Heather.
Yeah, I think, Evan, I was thinking of something right along those same lines, is that it's important to not be making those decisions and make it clear that they're the ones that have to continue to make decisions about their life, right? So you're there to offer them advice, which is options in their situation and what might happen if they choose those options. But it's up to them to weigh those consequences and to decide what to do. So that, I don't know, whatever that.
But Heather, what would you do?
Ends up looking like a trusted advisor, or yeah.
I can't decide. Tell me what to do. And on that point, because Evan mentioned independent legal advice, and that's what's funny is that the lawyers that say, yeah, let's let our clients be adults, because they are adults most of the time, and they can make adult decisions. They do many other adult decisions in the world, and it's funnily enough that the courts sometimes sort of make us be so heavy-handed with them that it is almost to the point of a parent-child relationship where it's like, okay, look, yeah, I agree with that. But unless it's sort of beyond the pale and totally unconscionable, you're an adult, you can choose to sign this against my legal advice, and that's fine. And we do that. Let's let our clients be adults. But sometimes I tell clients, yeah, your separation agreement is 42 pages long. It could probably be 10 pages long. And in some ways, those bulletproofing provisions are really more for the lawyers than they are for the clients, because we're, the standard we have to get to now to confirm they're doing this voluntarily. Like, okay, do I have to, give you more recent precedents, that of the Supreme Court to make sure that the clients read the actual decision that they're doing this voluntarily? No, that's a ridiculous standard, but that's not how lawyers operate. But sometimes it seems that the courts want us to get to that level where you're almost the parent. They force
us to do it against our will.
That's right. I'm sorry I have to do this, but legally.
There are parents is how it works, basically. Oh, I'm kidding. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, like the 5 or 6 pages on the spousal support waiver, I can summarize those pretty quickly for the client. But, I'm like, over the next 5 pages, this is what we're going to say in every way possible. No spousal support. This is going to be paid by anyone, no matter what.
And they get that. Right. And they understand that concept, right? You don't have to explain the principles of Miglin, but that's for the average listener. They'll be like, "What is Tkachuk talking about now?" And just a private gripe of mine.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question. Kim, did you have anything else on that topic or any other questions?
I don't know if this is maybe an idea for a future episode, but Dustin slid in something at the beginning that we haven't talked about on this program, I don't think, which was financial abuse. And I wonder if that's like a topic that we would do a podcast on.
Well, we should for sure. Right, yeah, Heather?
I don't know about what he was referring to. I got an idea, but I don't really know. And I think maybe we can have Dustin back if he's open to it to come and talk about financial abuse as it relates.
I'd love to come back. Yeah, this has been a blast. I've had a great time. I'd like to talk more than I thought, I guess. But and just as sort of a short snapper, Kim, I guess the reason I brought it up in the context of sort of what we call family violence, and because that's what the statute says. Before in the Divorce Act, and even in Alberta's kind of provincial legislation that deals with family violence, it was mostly focused on what people think about with violence: actual physical violence, threats of violence, abuse, that kind of thing. And so and the Divorce Act had been sitting there since 1982 or whatever it was, and hadn't been updated. And so when these new updates came out, they said, well, family violence could be all the usual suspects that people think about, but it could include things like financial abuse. What does that mean? Well, it's new enough that I'm not aware off the top of my head of any kind of judgments where a court says this is what we consider to be a definition of financial abuse. But in many of our files, I would say at the very least, one of the partners tends to be a bit, looser with the purse strings than the other partner does. One person's more financially responsible or maybe more just sort of detailed in some ways. And that's fine. And lots of relationships can function like that. But sometimes there's, cases where it gets to the point of I'm holding the debit card and the credit card. You don't get that unless, something happens. That's inappropriate. And just sort of that kind of control is sort of usually what they mean, or sort of taking away funds, using it for themselves, and the family suffers because the one person, is kind of controlling that. So that's something that certainly has been in marriages and divorces since the beginning of time. But now for the first time, that's in our Divorce Act across Canada, that this is now a factor for the court to consider when they're making decisions about these issues now. And so that's something as lawyers we have to kind of grapple with and say, okay, is this something, when we talked about things that were relevant and not relevant, well, before I would have to tell them, well, is this really strictly relevant for the issues we're talking about? Not really, but now, well, maybe it is now, right? So there's been a shift there, and I think that'd be a good podcast.
Mm-hmm. That would be a really interesting topic.
Okay, well, you're on Heather's hit list now, Dustin. Again, back on the hit list.
I'm happy to be on the hit list.
I was going to ask if you have any tips for clients to keep their stress level down. So I jotted down 2 tips that I've suggested to clients in the past. And one of them is more in their interactions with their ex, if they're finding that stressful, to set up a separate email account, whatever, me at gmail.com, that's separate from the one you normally use, to communicate with your former spouse or your ex, so that it's not popping up in your inbox when you're out having a nice dinner or grocery shopping or whatever, right? If you can check it once a day at a time when you're ready, you're not going to be surprised by that email that's popping up unexpectedly. And I also jotted down, if you have that lawyer on the other side that you don't get a lot of choice about, and maybe when they send an affidavit or they send a letter, it sends your client through the roof every time, you could ask your lawyer, can you vet the correspondence and just tell me what it's about? You have a right to read that correspondence as a client, but if it's sending your blood pressure through the roof, maybe you ask your lawyer to just tell you what the important bits are that you need to respond to. Any other practical tips that either of you use for clients to help them through that kind of stuff?
I think those are excellent tips. I think the communication is a big thing now, especially on our phones 24/7, as you said. And so sometimes those guidelines are just saying, even, and unless they're really amicable, and we know some people fight about certain things, but overall they can still, especially with children, they can still be co-parents, and that those files, tend to work fairly well. But if the communication is always, text messages starting to blow up back and forth, limit the communication, 1 email per day. Other party will respond within 24 hours. If there's something emergent coming up, then you can call or text, but let's just keep it like that to keep the white noise kind of down on the communications here. Mm-hmm. In terms of lawyer and client, in my retainer letter, I like to sort of set out and say, look, we're busy. Here's how court works. We got lots of stuff going on. We're listening to you, but understand it might take us some time to get back to you. Don't send us 15 kind of one-line emails. Think about all the things that you want to cover with us, and then in one email, and we'll kind of get back to you in 24 to 48 hours, unless it's really emergent. So setting client expectations, I guess, for communications between themselves and the other party, but also lawyer client say I'll get back to you. It might not be, I might not be able to pick up the phone right now because I'm on a podcast, but I'll get back to you right after, that kind of thing. So I think that can help the client understand you have other files that you have to work on. As you say, Heather, I'd like to work on everything simultaneously, but you can't. And there's a little bit of sort of prioritizing. I think that helps. And then I think explaining the court process. Sometimes I forget, right? Because this is my job. And it's kind of like when you go, hang out with a bunch of doctors and they're speaking in essentially a different language. We get accused of, of legalese and Latin use and all that kind of stuff. But really, anybody in a job, you start to use your acronyms and things like that. And you forget, oh, wait, I'm talking to people who might not know what's going on here. So over the years, I've really tried to go through the process, sometimes even, doing a little flow chart so people understand what is chambers, what is this, what is going on, what's going to happen. So this is the final order. Oh, no. This is just the first order. They'll probably last us for 3 months until we get to the next place. And so I think the stress comes down when you explain the overall process to them as well, because it's, Some people surprisingly seem to know quite a bit and get it really quickly, but a lot of clients really don't understand what does a judge decide? Is it final? What happens next? And so that's a stressful thing. I don't know when this ends. What happens now? What happens next? You know, so.
I really like the second tip that you gave, Heather. I think that's fantastic. I've told clients, before you hit send, just maybe don't. Come back to it later, read it again, delete it, and send something that's less filled with emotion. And I do have a fair number of clients where our relationship is like limited scope or legal coaching. So that's where I'm not representing them for everything. They are in charge of communication between them and the other party or the other lawyer. And so, for those clients especially, I try to encourage them to keep their emotions out of it as much as possible. Get somebody else to trust, your new partner to read it. And although that may sometimes not be helpful, and sometimes the advice is, okay, your new partner needs to be not involved in any communication with your old partner whatsoever. I know, like, everyone knows he or she's writing the texts for you. That's got to stop.
Although sometimes that is better.
Yeah.
Once in a while, it's one or the other. Yeah,
that's right. Depends on the situation. Either it's the absolute worst or it's the only solution. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, it can be tough. Everyone can understand it. It's easy to explain. Like, yeah, when this happens, it triggers you and you get really upset, and that's totally understandable. Just don't get upset, right? Yeah, I can understand that, but that doesn't mean you can necessarily just not be upset about it. And so I think that's, and we have tools like the parenting apps for phones that sometimes can help with that. I mean, and the thing is, I don't think it actually helps with the communication. It just records it all. So it provides like a different incentive. Like, okay, you want to send that dumb text? It can be produced for court very easily. Are you sure you want to, like, that text is forever?
Yeah, I had a really, really terrible high conflict file years ago, and we're in case management, which means that every time we went to court, we'd go see the same judge. And he got so tired of the parties' little snippy texts back and forth, he did what he called a swear jar clause in the order, so that we'd come back in 3 months' time. And he told me, Tkachuk, you're going to print every single one of these texts these guys send to each other. Every time they curse at each other, they're inappropriate. It's going to be $50 a shot. And, you could tell the parties' faces like, what? And he's like, you're being both so ridiculous. A file where they've both been, thrown in the can by the RCMP for, not following parenting orders, and just completely ignorant and ridiculous. And that's kind of how bad it can get with this communication. You get fired up, and that's understandable. And the other interesting thing, I guess, that I'll just sort of mention on the other side in terms of sort of that relevance for the client and inflammatory stuff. There's stuff that's very obviously inflammatory to anybody, who sees it. When you're posting nude photos of your ex with, someone else, just to essentially irritate them. We all get that. But there's sometimes where and Kim, you talked about sort of caring for the client, and they'll say, look at these texts, Dustin, look at these texts. They're terrible. And I'll look at them like, yeah, okay, you guys are disagreeing about hockey skates or whatever. And they're like, well, he's just pushing my buttons here. I'm like, okay, I don't see it. I got to tell you, it looks like you guys are getting on each other's nerves a bit, but this is not like blow up the planet kind of, escalation here. And it's hard to, you got to tell clients sometimes, I don't get the history here. I know this is probably the same conversation you guys have had 25,000 times. And now you're just losing your mind because, they're doing it on purpose. But that's the other thing to try and get across to the client. Sometimes keep in mind, a judge who doesn't know you, doesn't know the other party, probably knows me, probably knows the other lawyer, is going to have to read this and understand at a real quick glance why this is bad. And that's hard for people to hear sometimes, because it is, they're not making up the frustration, but it's hard to get across sometimes.
Well, the worst is when you read the exchange and you're like, oh, you, my client, are the unreasonable one.
Perfect. Don't you see how unreasonable they're being? Oh.
Actually, they're coming across pretty rational.
Yeah.
One half is irrational, but it's not that person. Yeah.
I don't think this is a piece of advice I've given to folks before, and I don't know how often they've followed through on it. But I sometimes also point out that, like, even if we get to a trial about parenting and you win, you've still got a continuing relationship with this person, and you still need to communicate with them. So if you've got this horrible pattern of communication right now, then, you know, it probably will serve you well to either go and improve your communication skills or improve some skills on how to react emotionally when you receive communication, so that it isn't a trigger for rage every time, you know, your phone bings and it's a message from them. So, you know, that, I think that's, again, I don't know how often that advice is followed, but that would be my wish.
And, you know, and on that point, you know, I think it's good for the listeners to understand. We all, the judges and lawyers, we all know that the troubles that family law has in the justice system. And so that there's a real diversion now towards mediation, towards collaborative law. Sometimes if you have to fight, it's to go to arbitration, because you can get a family law lawyer to, you know, be the arbitrator and get a quick, well-reasoned decision, you know, in a quarter of the time and a quarter of the cost, and you went to go to a trial. But also beyond sort of court and lawyer services, a real push to, you know, go to therapy and go to, you know, some counseling. And because we know these people have, particularly where there's children, long-term, you know, ongoing relationship, you know, the idea is that you both sit at the same table for your kids, you know, grade 12 graduation, or at least you can both be in the building together, if not at the same table. And so that's kind of the push here, is let's not fight if we don't have to. And if you guys are still fighting, then the two of you might be the issue, and let's, you know, push you away from the litigation stream into, you know, maybe working on those communication issues that are really driving what's going on here. You both can parent your kids, we get that, but you can't talk to each other. We need to figure that out, right? And the judge can't do that. The lawyers can't do that. You need to kind of get some professional help from a different source.
I have a file that I've been just trying so hard to put onto Greg Pickering's plate. We've had Greg on here before. I've been trying so hard, and my client's all for it. I'm just like, you guys both clearly love your child. There's no doubt about that. You're both doing your best to be good parents, but you can't, they cannot communicate. It's just impossible. Yeah. And I'm the wrong person to be helping you with this. It's just, you're paying too much and getting a terrible result. And not because the result itself is necessarily terrible, but it's just the court is not going to help you fix the fundamental problem, which is the parents need to be able to work together to figure it out. And so that's a frustrating thing when, the only thing you can force somebody else to do, because you said, you brought up arbitration as a good example, Dustin, and instead of court, absolutely, but you can't force someone into arbitration, and you can't force someone to use a parenting coordinator. And that, ironically, the response that I was getting from the other side is they can't afford to pay for a parenting coordinator. I'm like, they can afford to pay you, but they can't afford to pay a parenting coordinator. You're blowing my mind. But there's lots of tools out there besides lawyers and the court. And usually any of the other tools are going to be better when it comes to figuring out the nuances of parenting disagreements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Communication misfires, all of those kinds of things. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, some of our clients can certainly be as bad as, I don't know, trying to argue on Twitter or something like that. It just gets out of control real quick.
So Heather, we exhausted your list of questions and things you wanted to milk out of Dustin's mind?
For today, I mean, yes, I have a whole other subset of questions, I think, but I think that's been wonderful, some wonderful tips and comments, and a great discussion today. Kim, did you have anything else?
Well, I have a third episode I want Dustin to come back on now.
I could sense that you were sitting on something there.
So everybody's calling me trying to figure out the process of divorce. And we've done, 44 episodes, and we still, lawyers don't seem to want to dig into the process. And then Dustin just magically comes out with, he's got a flow chart and he knows the process. And I'm thinking, this is what people contacting me are trying to figure out. And I want him back for a third episode. The flow chart.
Hey, I'm a little offended, Kim, because one of our first episodes was like, I think it was, how much does it cost to get divorced? I'm pretty sure we went through process. There's lots of different streams to get a divorce. But
not so much as like the main like mediation, collaborative, whatever. Dustin went into a level of detail that is like, he almost used to work in like mega project management in the construction space. Like what he kind of dipped into is not what, I don't think what we've got so far. Anyway.
My wife would be like, what? He's a totally different person at home, apparently.
Hey, let's get that flow chart on the episode.
We'll find out if I'm wrong and I just forgot. But anyways,
that's not a bad idea. Yeah. Okay. So kind of court procedures. What does it look like? What's the end point? What are the sort of middle steps? Sure.
Yours is quite like step oriented, and this is like people are looking for this information. So anyways, we might have dipped into that in past episodes, but I kind of think what you were going on there was a level of detail we haven't got to yet. But it was a pleasure to have you on the program, Dustin. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
It was great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
What's our tagline? That's the way the cookie crumbles, or?
Any information in this video is general information only and is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. Watching this video does not create a lawyer-client relationship. You should always seek the advice of a lawyer or other qualified professional for advice regarding your individual situation. While we take care to ensure that the information contained in this video is accurate and up to date, we make no warranties or representations as to the suitability, completeness, or accuracy of the information contained in this video. Any reliance you place on the information is at your own risk. Kahane Law Office, Merrick Law, Heather Malarick Professional Corporation, Evan Clark Professional Corporation, Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, and any guests will not be responsible nor liable in any way for any content, including but not limited to any errors or omissions in the content, or for any loss or damage of any kind incurred as a result of any content communicated in this video, whether by Evan Clark, Heather Malarick, or by a third party. Kim McDonald is a financial advisor with Raymond James Limited. Information provided is not a solicitation, and although obtained from sources considered reliable, is not guaranteed. The view and opinions contained in this media are those of Kim McDonald, not Raymond James Limited. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, RJFE, a subsidiary of Raymond James Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. When providing life insurance products, financial advisors are acting as insurance representatives of RJFE.
Darkness of the dales dissipates, declines, because of he who turned water